Hello and welcome to the Family Brand Podcast. My name is Chris. I'm a husband, a father, and an entrepreneur.
My name's Melissa, and I am a wife, mother, former nurse turned real estate investor.
And we believe the greatest gift you can give your child is a last name that stands for something.
Your last name is your family's brand.
If you are a parent who wants to raise your child to know who they are, love who they are, and believe in who they are, this show is for you.
We promise to bring you real and authentic conversations with parents and experts who are committed to making their family their life's most important work.
This show will help you take a stand for your family and to raise your children by design, not default.
Hello, we are so stoked to be here this week. And before we really get into the episode, we have to make a special plug or promo.
Invitation?
Yeah, for a virtual date night. That's likely, depending on when you're listening to this, it's likely happening tomorrow night or tonight for you. So it's Friday. We'll have a link
July
to
12th.
it. Yeah, July 12th, virtual date night. Last one we did was super fun. I had a bunch of cool couples come for the virtual date night. So we're doing it again and would love to have you join us.
And I did a terrible job. Like a real marketer would have been marketing this for weeks, and you might be hearing about it for the first time. And if that's okay, you're listening to this episode after it's already happened, still go to the link. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, and you can just get the recording. So either way, if you can't make it live, you want to get the recording, so you can do that.
And on today's episode, what we wanted to talk about, just coming off of a really fun 4th of July weekend, where we had the opportunity to spend some really quality time with some amazing families and friends, is the power of like who you choose to surround your kids with. And you've heard us talk about this before. We kind of call it the cool aunt, cool uncle effect. And it's this idea that sometimes or oftentimes, I don't know if this is the case with your children, but we've seen that our children will listen to other adults maybe differently than they'll listen to us as their mom and dad. And I think that's pretty common in all walks of life. Like I know at the Possibility Company all the time, we have owners of companies that we consult who are like, oh, my people listen to you differently than they listen to me as the leader or the owner every day.
Even if it's like the same delivery almost.
Oh, it can be the exact same, the
Message.
And so we had the opportunity to go to Utah for the 4th of July, which we love Utah in the summer. It's not nearly as hot as Arizona. It's just beautiful and green and there's water everywhere. So we're a big fan of Utah in the summers. And we had the opportunity to go up there for the 4th of July and spend the weekend with the Alexander family, who they've been through Family Brand. Clayton has actually been a client of mine through the Possibility Company. They're just the coolest family. And they were so welcoming to us. And I just observed the
That's an understatement, by the way. They were like above and beyond. They put us up in their trailer. It's like a big, to invite 7, we know them, but like we'd never been to their house before.
We've never hung out with our families. Melissa and I have hung out with Clayton and Alex.
So to invite 7 people, 5
human beings,
5 children to your home, and they like prepared their trailer for us. And they had snacks in there, and they bought us shirts from this local, what kind of a shop is that?
Like a farming and ranch store that sells apparel and farm equipment. And they live in this coolest little small like farming ranching town called Oakley, Utah.
Anyways, sorry to shout out to them.
Stocked their house filled with groceries. Like we just had unlimited access to groceries. They were just, they were incredible. And when we say that we stayed in their travel trailer, it's like, that does it a disservice. It's like, it's nicer and bigger than the first 2 apartments or condos or homes that Melissa and I lived in. We referred to it as the Taj Mahal. So anyways, they were incredible. It rolled out the red carpet for us.
And it did have me think like, oh, am I this warm and welcoming when people come to visit me? Probably not, but it's something to aspire to.
They've given us some goals, some hospitality goals. But that's amazing. And
yes,
I just observed the conversations that Clayton and Alex were willing to have with our children, especially our 2 older boys. It was awesome. And I've seen this at play or in effect so many different, in so many different times or circumstances or scenarios. And so Melissa and I have been very intentional of like, who are the families that we want to spend more time around? Not just because Melissa and I enjoy it, but there's also, we're conscious of this idea of like, who are the people we want to have our children spend time around? They're going to likely pour into our children and have meaningful conversations with them and actually like want to connect with them. And Clayton and Alex were amazing at that. I've also learned the hard way that when that's happening, I have learned to get out of there. Meaning there were so many times where I'd walk into a room or walk over to the basketball court or walk over to the pool, and Clayton would be talking with one of my boys, and I would consciously not insert myself. And sometimes I would, or a conversation would start and I'd kind of remove myself because just to allow them that space. And so I just think it's really, it hit me this, coming off that weekend, that it's important to be conscious, I think, of families and individuals we're surrounding ourselves with, but also our children, who can elevate and inspire our children, who can sometimes challenge our children, who can give them advice that they might hear differently from someone else. I'm just super, super appreciative of the people who have been willing to and continue to pour into my kids.
Yeah, I love that. One thing I noticed, so we stayed with the Alexanders, and then we had the opportunity, a friend in our hometown invited us to visit her family cabin. It was about 20 minutes from where we had been staying, and same thing, there was other adults there that were having conversations with my older kids, and I realized maybe the opposite of that, how quick I was to be part of the conversation. And I realized they're getting older, especially my oldest two are almost 17 and 15. And I realized they get to have their own conversations now and their own opinions, and they don't need me to interject mine in there, which I feel like I kind of was doing in that conversation. People were asking them questions and asking for their opinion about their future plans and what their life was like. And I just noticed how quick I was to want to jump in and give my piece. But I kind of realized in the moment, this isn't about me. But it's kind of, I think, a difficult transition to make sometimes as your kids are getting older and you're used to being the center of all of it. And it does all revolve around you as the mom or the dad. You're the one that's making everything happen for them. Yeah, it's hard to step back sometimes and let them start taking the lead and realizing that they can do it. And it's time for them to have these conversations and these experiences, maybe without you.
Yeah, I'll share two thoughts on that. One is, maybe this is already kind of obvious in what I said earlier, but said differently, I also really like putting my children in the path of conversations with adults. I think all of our kids get plenty of opportunities to talk to other kids, but I love my kids getting the opportunity and almost having to talk to adults, because it can be intimidating sometimes for kids and they don't want to look people in the eye or they don't want to engage in a conversation. And so I love when my kids do that. And I love when adults will engage my kids in conversation, which brings up another point that oftentimes my temptation, though, is to, like you said, answer the questions for my kids or fill in them. And so I think it takes some real discipline to no, I've put my children in a position to be surrounded by some really awesome adults. And to allow that to happen is, I think, a real gift for our kids. And I hope that my kids feel confident talking to other kids. I hope they feel confident, having and carrying on a conversation with an adult. I think it's such an important life skill. And sadly, I think a lot of younger people are maybe losing a little bit of that skill or that ability to just communicate and carry on a conversation, especially with an adult. So that's just, I just wanted to, it's a shorter episode for us today, but I think it's just it's becoming more and more present for us. And Melissa and I weren't super intentional about this early on. We'd almost kind of reflect on an experience or a trip, and we'd be like, oh, that was so cool. Now that I think about it, our kids got to have some really cool conversations and dialogue with, that family or that the husband or the wife or whoever it was. And I think in years, more recent, we've actually been intentional about seeking out families and relationships where we know that, hey, if we just get around them, good conversations are going to happen and they're going to pour into our kids, and hopefully we can do the same, pour into their family and pour into their children. And so, yeah, that would be my one thing I would share with you is just maybe an encouragement would be, think about consciously, who are the individuals and families that I want to surround our family with and surround my children with? And then when you have put them in that path of conversation, maybe really give them the space to have a voice and have their own opinions and have to answer those questions instead of jumping in and doing it for them.
I want to share one example of, without revealing this child's identity, of how this kind of played out in a way that I feel like is like really applicable. Kind of like we started that sometimes someone can say the same thing to your kids, but it's not you, the parent. And so it like lands different. And one example that I think ties all this together is this was a couple years ago. We were at dinner and we had gone to dinner with someone who's, a really successful business person. And the way we ended up sitting at dinner was that he was at one end of the table with some of my kids, and we were kind of at the other end of the table. And
I now know
what I'm talking about.
I now know the story you're telling.
Okay, and at the end of dinner, we found out that this man had kind of called out one of my kids on their manners, on their table manners. Do you remember what he had told them?
Yeah, well, and just for more context, this is a conversation that has been ongoing with this particular child for years in our family, just around like table manners, table etiquette, like how to use silverware. And it's just, and not a conversation that particular child has ever been interested in having, or that we felt like we'd ever seen any kind of like response to the suggestions.
So it wasn't like a lack of effort on our part as parents, like we had been trying.
And also we've had lots of conversations of like, how do we have this conversation with this child that doesn't make them feel bad, or they're being shamed, or like, are we bringing it up too often? But at the same time, we don't want them to show up in the world like a wild animal, like when they eat in public, and then we're thinking like, well, maybe they just eat this way at home because they're comfortable, but so it was actually perfect. I actually was sitting down at that end of the table, so I heard the whole thing.
Oh, maybe I was at the other end.
Yeah, no, you were. And he just said to this particular child, like, hey, can I give you some advice and share some feedback with you? And this, particular child was like, sure. And he just said, there's certain ways that if you act or behave, it has people start to form an opinion of you that may not be the opinion that you want them to have of you. Like, for example, with your table manners and how you eat and how you hold your silverware, how you chew, and anyways, and the whole time he's saying this, I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm also like sensitive, like I hope, and he was really sensitive about how he did it and made sure he didn't do it in front of everyone.
Delivered.
And it really did impact, wouldn't you say? Like this particular child has brought it up a number of times, and we started seeing like a change.
Yeah. So just like a funny story of how that actually played out in real life. And I don't know, I'm just so grateful that we have people like that in our life so we can put our children next to at dinner. And also that he was willing to have that conversation and really serve my child. And I hope that, like you said, we want to do that for other people. I hope that we can also be that for other families and parents.
Yeah, maybe that's one thing that I didn't even think about. I'm just thinking about this selfishly through my lens of like, how can I get people to pour into my children? And it's had me, though, be more aware of I can do the same for others. I can do the same for other families and, speak possibility into their kids and just share ideas or insights or guidance that, another family might really appreciate.
And lastly, it reminds me of Jill Lane, who we had on the podcast recently. She talks about championing people.
Being a champion of people.
Yeah, being a champion.
I've done that before too with her, championing.
Being a champion of people. And I think in her episode, which was so great, she talked about how sometimes it just takes one person to have a conversation with you, to see you and speak possibility into you or your child, and how we can do that for each other and for other people's kids. So we will leave that episode here with you this week, saying who is someone in your life that you can champion and that you can pour into, and also how can you put our kids in those situations as well. Thank you so much for listening to the Family Brand Podcast. To say thank you, we have something really awesome we'd love to share with you.
We often hear from families who will tell us that they just feel so overwhelmed because of the demands that are placed on them. They feel like they're constantly being pulled in so many different directions and spread thin, and they're spending time as a family, but they don't feel like it's quality time. They're not really connected, and they want to be more intentional. And we can certainly relate because we felt like that at one point in our family. And so we created a guide that allowed us to really be more confident around how we spend time as a family and what we say yes to and what we say no to. And it's just brought so much more peace into our home. It's made our lives so much more simple, and we want to share it with you. So if you go to familybrand.com/free, you can download the How to Take Back Your Family's time guide, and I can promise you it'll give you more confidence and more peace in your life and in your family.
One last thing, we feel so inspired when we hear from families that we are making a difference for them. We would love it if you would leave us a 5-star rating and a review on the podcast so we can reach even more amazing families. We truly believe that the way we change the world is one family at a time.